Hi everybody, it's me, the Fetch, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there's Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
This week we interview Dr. Michael-Salla, and Michael is the author of the Amazon.com bestseller Insiders Reveal Secret Space Programs and Extraterrestrial Alliances. Excuse me, September 2015. It was published, and he has 4 other popular books on classified programs involving extraterrestrial life and technology. He has held full-time academic positions at the Australian National University and American University in Washington, D.C., and has also taught at Queensland University and George Washington University. He has been interviewed for the Ancient Aliens television show and is a regular guest on Coast to Coast AM radio. And his website is exopolitics.org. And I want to tell you a little bit about his new book before we bring him on. It's called Insiders Reveal Secret Space Programs and Extraterrestrial Alliances. Classified space programs have been an integral part of a complex jigsaw puzzle concerning UFOs, extraterrestrial life, ancient civilizations, and advanced aerospace technologies, which have long defied any coherent understanding. Now, finally, we have something to put all the pieces together with the disclosure of secret space program whistleblower Goode. A detailed investigation of Goode's and other insider testimonies reveals the big picture of a parallel world of secret space programs and extraterrestrial alliances. So from this book, we will learn how the Vril Nazi flying saucer programs in the 1930s gave birth to the Dark Fleet, how Operation Paperclip scientists both helped and hindered the development of the U.S. Navy's solar-warden, how the MJ-12 group was behind the creation of the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate, and how Ronald Reagan was instrumental in the creation of the Global Galactic League of Nations space program. And finally, you'll learn how the Spear Being Alliance and the other extraterrestrials interact with these programs. The full disclosure of secret space programs and extraterrestrial alliances will unshackle the chains of deception, holding humanity back from reaching its highest potential as galactic citizens. Dr. Lessin, what would you like to say before we bring on Dr. Salla?
Okay, I really highly recommend everybody taking a look at Insiders Reveal, Secret Space Programs and Extraterrestrial Alliances, because this really puts it together. The Blue Avians are here to help us, and we need help, and this is the right time for them to come. Michael Hill, who is the keynote speaker at some of the Native American things, has been talking about a Blue Avian who's actually come to their conferences, and they're coming public. And Goode, we got to hear him. Joshua Tree. This is it. This is disclosure. Michael's done it, and you've got to listen up, everybody.
Welcome to our show, Dr. Michael-Salla.
Aloha, Janet and Sasha. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, we're very happy to have you. We had you on our show last year, so this is great. Really appreciate you coming back.
Well, lots happened in that 1 year, and yes, the book has come out, and I think it really does help people that are wanting to understand what's the big picture, what is really going on in terms of extraterrestrial visitation and secret space programs, and I think Corey Goode really is an amazing whistleblower and a contactee too. That's something we can talk about.
Michael, are you outside or something? If it's kind of wind is coming through your mic, if you want to try to protect your mic from the wind a little bit.
Sure, yes, I actually do have a lanai that I'm perched on at the moment.
Oh,
That's
sorry. Okay, well, maybe there's just some way to protect because the wind is coming through the mic and we're having trouble hearing you, but it's a little bit better now. Thank you for that. Okay, so go ahead and continue. Sorry for the interruption.
About Corey.
Yeah, about Corey Goode, because we did see him at Contact in the Desert with David Wilcock, and they featured a lot of time with Corey. And we have interviewed Randy Kramer. So I'm interested in how their information correlates and how it differs, and what you have to say about both of these whistleblowers and others.
Right. The thing about Corey is that he came out roughly about 6 months after Randy Kramer. Randy was the first one to really kind of go into depth on the secret space programs as a kind of 20-year tour of duty for operatives that are recruited into. He wasn't the first one. The first one was Michael Ralph back in 2000 with his book, The Mars Record. But those that read the Mars Record, a lot of it is really about the process by which Michael recalled his memories and how credible that process is in terms of being sure about what his memories are. But with Randy Kramer, he went through his own process, and you get a much clearer picture of how the secret space programs operated. And one of the things about Corey Goode was that his testimony overlaps with some of the things that Randy Kramer talked about, such as that this program used young children that had been put through a rigorous training process from around the age of 5 or 6, that children at that age are identified, and that they are put through a covert program without their parents knowing anything about that. And over the years, normally takes about anywhere between 10 to 12 years to train these children to be operatives with a certain skill set that's then going to be used in the secret space program. And then at around the age of 17, 18, while they're still teenagers, these kids or these teenagers now begin their tours of duty. And so these tours of duty last for 20 years, and they do all sorts of things up there. And then at the end of that 20-year tour of duty, then they're age regressed, brought back in time, and their memories are scrubbed of their experiences, and they basically relive the 20 years again. So, this is incredible testimony for anyone to come forward with. As I mentioned, Michael Ralph was the first to come forward with that kind of experience. Randy Kramer was the second. And then with Corey Goode's emergence, he became the third whistleblower to do that. But it's really the clarity and the detail in Corey's recollections, as well as Randy. Randy also has very detailed recollections of his experiences for that 20 years. But Corey, in terms of his demeanor, his sincerity, he's been very successful in getting a very large public following that just really feel that he is telling the truth and that he is revealing the inner workings of the secret space programs. And what makes Corey different to Randy Kramer is that while Randy has a lot of experiences himself in terms of 17 years on Mars and then 3 years in the secret space program, these are things that he directly experienced. Corey, not only did he have things that he directly experienced, he was given access to these smart glass pads. And these smart glass pads had the whole history of the secret space programs, and Corey's position required that he would be familiar with some of the history of the programs and the operational aspects of these programs. And so, in addition to his own direct experiences serving on the secret space programs, Corey had this access to these basically intelligence briefings on the smart glass pads. And so Corey's information is very detailed. It's very rich in both the kind of operational and the developmental aspects of the secret space programs. And then to top it off, Corey, over the last 5 years, has become a contactee with the Blue Avians. So that's another layer to Corey's testimony. So really, I think he is the most significant whistleblower to come forward on these secret space programs ever.
Michael, what really got me is that Corey actually names the names. Kissinger was at this meeting, and that kind of thing. That's amazing.
Well, that's right. That Corey's most recent responsibility has been to be a delegate for this new group of extraterrestrials that arrived into our solar system, actually into this galactic, the local galactic cluster, which is, I believe it's around a dozen solar systems that the Blue Avians have come in. Actually, it's a group of 5 very highly evolved densities or higher density beings. These are more highly evolved than the other extraterrestrials that have a long history, an unbroken history in human affairs, going back hundreds of thousands of years. And here we're talking about the ones that many people are familiar with, the Pleiadians, the Sirians, the Andromedans, the Arcturians, the Draconians, and so forth. That more recently you have this other group, the Sphere Being Alliance, so one of those are the Blue Avians. One of those 5 are Blue Avians. I believe Corey describes them as a 6th density race of beings, which means that they are more highly evolved in consciousness than the other extraterrestrials who have been. So in a way, they are here to basically help oversee the transition of this sector of the galaxy to another frequency field, because we are entering a region of the galaxy that heightens vibrations. And so this is what that group of extraterrestrials are doing, and Corey was chosen by them to be their delegate. And because of that, Corey has been sitting in on these very high-level negotiations involving different space programs. He's been sitting in on meetings involving different extraterrestrial races that have traditionally been kind of interacting with humanity. So he brings in that extra layer of information, which is truly quite an incredible amount of information.
I have a couple questions, because this is fascinating. I want to get into great detail about all these things. First of all, we have other reports of other people that have been in these high-level type meetings. One of these gentlemen is now deceased. His name is A.R. Borden. And so that's kind of like validation that there are these type of meetings. Also, Joanne Richards' husband, what's his name? Mark Richards was involved in these meetings with beings of greater awareness. And so there's some validation there. These meetings are going on. There are people that have come forth over the years. And so Corey's... Oh, and then also there's the information about the different people are debriefed about how the universe is set up in the different beings. That level. I know, like Stuart Swerdlow, I talked to him a couple times, and he said he was in those type of briefings. And then we have stories of other people that have been those type of briefings. And the other connection that you're pulling into this story is the recruitment of children. So we have Andrew Basiago, Corey Goode, Randy Kramer, and I also have a contact the experiencer, whistleblower, Teresa J. Morris, and she was recruited at a very young age. And then you have the story of the regressing them back. Teresa J. Morris and her husband, Tom Morris, were actually reincarnated. They were incarnated into human form, and their primary soul identification is more like a gray or that type of being, but they were brought into the space program into human form, and then they were recruited by the U.S. military. Who did the recruiting of Corey and Randy? Was that our U.S. military or one of the secret space programs?
We're talking about when they were children, like around the age of 5 or 6. Okay. I think that they were just identified by because they had certain skill sets that made them people or children of interest, and they were then taken into special classes and monitored. In the case of Randy, he says it was a special section of the U.S. Marine Corps that identified him and put him through a program which really was different to many of the other MyLab programs that were in existence at the time. Randy has actually, as you know, made a very clear separation between the kind of very trauma-based mind control used in many of the MyLab programs as opposed to the one used by the U.S. Marine Corps. He says the U.S. Marine Corps mind control program, he described it as being kind of like, he contrasted against the grain versus with the grain mind control technologies. You know, one was basically trying to break the will by separating or compartmentalizing the mind, whereas the other approach was to kind of like use a deep-seated nationalism that everyone had to accentuate that, so that way a person would be more highly motivated to just kind of like be a part of the program and do what was expected of them. And so this is what Randy says it was involved with him, and it was the Marine Corps. With Corey, he really just describes it as going through a training regimen where his psychic skills were recognized, and that he was eventually put through as an intuitive empath, and then recruited ultimately into the solar program run by the Navy. So I guess from that you might infer that it was really the Navy that was involved in identifying Corey at a young age. Definitely different branches of the U.S. military take an interest in these kids that are identified very early with certain abilities, and they basically say, yes, we want that one, or we want that one, and I think that's how they choose who's going to work with them in which covert program, because there are many different covert programs. Not all of them involve the secret space programs. As you know, there are many MyLabs or many people that have been put through these programs. You mentioned Andy Basiago is one of those. I mean, he wasn't part of us. He wasn't. He didn't fulfill a 20-year tour of duty, as far as I know. I mean, even though he did serve on the Project Pegasus and was sent to Mars to perform certain tasks up there. But it didn't seem to be a kind of extended term of service, such as in Randy or Corey or Michael Ralph's case.
What I find really interesting in the Basiago case, in some of your book, is that Randy's testimony too, is that you can return people to a different timeline. So Basiago and Kramer are both saying there's this technology of time living in the future and sending you back to live that time again.
Well, that's right. Yes, that's an important part of the technology that has been developed, that it enables people to basically relive the years that have been lost, which I think is a really important way in which they're able to recruit people, because I think if most of us were told that, well, we would serve for 20 years in some sort of advanced program, and for that 20 years we lose touch with our families, friends, and then we come back after, and then at the end of that 20 years, you just come back to society, but you've lost contact with family and friends. That might be something that would be hard to get people to accept, because as many of with existing military tours of duty, people might serve up for 6 years in the Navy, but during that Navy, even with something that's extended, like service in the, say, nuclear submarine fleet, for many countries have nuclear submarines. You might serve for several months, but then you have shore leave for a month or whatever, and you come back and you reintegrate. Well, with these secret space programs, security would not allow that. So you needed to have something that would basically be very secure and allow people to sign up for extended tours of duty. And so this was the technology that was eventually developed and was successfully used on all three of them, age regressing them 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So these people could be basically immortal, in a sense, if they kept regressing them. And is that perhaps what's happening with some high-level people around the planet?
Well, that's a really interesting question. One of the newer whistleblowers who has come forward is William Tompkins. He is someone that worked with the U.S. Navy in helping develop anti-gravity technologies and some of the advanced technologies relating to things like age regression. And he had a lot to do with understanding how the Nazis did age regression, because they were the first to start developing these technologies, and how different extraterrestrial groups did the age regression. In the case, Bill Tompkins says that with the Nordic extraterrestrials, that they're able to maintain an extended lifetime of several thousand years, and some of that can use technology to kind of like keep them in to that age. So I think that there is a kind of a natural time at which these technologies can be used. I don't think it is something that is essentially can make one immortal. I think after a couple of thousand years, there may be something that essentially cannot be reversed anymore through the age regression technologies. So I think there is a limit, but a couple of thousand years is an extraordinary age for any human to live, and if we were to live that long, whether it was through advanced age regression technologies or some kind of genetic alterations performed by ET groups or some awakening, higher consciousness, that would really give us incredible knowledge.
And perhaps by that time they might, well, I've heard that they have soul transference. I know in Majestic by Whitley Strieber, he talks about they accidentally destroyed a human and they put him in another body. So maybe that's not even important, that if your body wears out, they just move you, who you are, your soul or whatever that essence is, to a new body. Did you have a question, Sasha?
Not a question. Well, it's just another exploration that your research and John Leith's and others bring us to the story that seems to be coming out, that some people that have said they were extraterrestrials, turns out they were really interterrestrials. And when we discovered the Nazis had their base in New Schwabenland, that was just the beginning of examining the evidence for Agartha, for Bodland, for the ancient Vikings, for the German colonists who started tunneling from the Amazon and wound up under the Antarctic. And I think that Corey has been mentioning he hasn't gone deeply inside under the subterranean part, but he's gone under the ice part. And I just love how you opened this subject up too.
Well, that's an important part of Corey Goode's disclosures is the role of the inner Earth civilizations. He's had quite a number of meetings with them now. It seems that the inner Earth civilizations are very old. Some of them go back as much as 18 million years, according to Corey's information. And they have been generally very reluctant to reveal themselves to humanity, and when they have made contact, rather than saying they're from the inner Earth, they've said that they're either gods or they're extraterrestrials. And according to Corey, this is something that they've been doing more recently through various contacts, whether it's physical, whether it's telepathic, that they've been telling people that they are extraterrestrial, and so that has been a subject of the negotiations that Corey has participated in some of these meetings where these inner Earth beings have been kind of like confronted with the fact that they have that they haven't been fully honest with surface humanity in the contacts, and so this has led to a split amongst the inner Earth civilizations. Some of them are deciding that they were going to now be honest, reveal who they truly were in order to facilitate open contact in some near time, in the near future, and other groups within the inner Earth who were still very reluctant to reveal themselves, and so they've decided to just kind of like break off from these negotiations and just kind of like continue doing what they were doing before in terms of deception to hide themselves.
So I have a question, and the wind is, maybe you could try to protect your mic a little bit from the wind a little bit more. It's getting really bad. Okay, what was I going to ask? What was the role, I want to talk about Ronald Reagan before we, somewhere before we end this show, but let's stick with the inner Earth and the society. So who is actually, like, behind Queen Elizabeth, or who's ruling the Earth? Are there reptilians? Is it the Anunnaki? Is it the Archons? Who's got the current head of this government that it's more than just what it appears to the average person watching Fox News? There's something going on there. In your opinion, what have you discovered?
Well, I think that the truth is that there is no one group in control of the planet Earth. There are many different groups that are vying for control. Some groups have more influence than others. That some groups have more control over particular areas than other groups. So, for example, we might look at, say, a country like Saudi Arabia, and say that in the case of Saudi Arabia, this is where the reptilians, the draconians, have more influence than say countries like Northern Europe, like the Scandinavian countries. So I think what we have is the reality that the different ET groups and the different secret societies have been vying for power for a long time. And while there may be alliances between them at certain times, and that they cooperate, for example, like multinational corporations, their interests may align for a certain time, and they make agreements. These agreements, these alliances are very fluid, and very recently, Corey has said that what happened around the time of Muhammad the Prophet was that up until that time, around 600 AD, in the modern era, basically extraterrestrials were openly revealing themselves to humanity, and they were openly fighting amongst themselves. So there was this conflict between the different ET groups. But in order to kind of like prevent that conflict, which was very destructive to all the ET groups, because essentially their, groups of people were being destroyed or civilizations were being attacked, that they decided that in the future that ET groups would not be allowed to openly reveal themselves, and that rather than overtly controlling humanity, it would now move into a kind of covert control. And Corey says that the agreements that enable that are called the Mohammedan Accords, because they date from the Prophet Muhammad. And so according to the Mohammedan Accords, extraterrestrial groups as well as the inner Earth civilizations cannot reveal themselves openly to humanity, but they can still covertly reveal themselves to different leaders or to kind of individuals. So essentially what we have on Earth is a very diffuse system in terms of how power is exercised behind the scenes by many different groups of ETs, secret societies, and nation states.
Wow. Did you have a question, or I have one? Okay, back to me. In your description for your book, you talk about how Ronald Reagan was instrumental in the creation of the Global Galactic League of Nations space program. Would you like to tell us more about that?
Sure. Well, in 1983, when Ronald Reagan began his first term, he basically was given a briefing. And in this briefing, he was told about some of the extraterrestrial groups that were visiting us or interacting with humanity. And the briefing was slanted towards the idea that these extraterrestrial groups were a threat, or that some extraterrestrial groups were extremely hostile to humanity and constituted an existential threat. And so Reagan, from that time, I believe, was fixated on the idea of an extraterrestrial threat. And we know historically that around 1985, right throughout his presidency, he made several comments about the need for humanity coming together to basically deal with a hostile alien threat. And that ultimately what happened was that, and this is something that comes largely from Corey Goode's revelations, is that around 1988, 89, early 90s, that the United Nations secretly came together to basically accept a proposal from the US, which was basically the leader in terms of having developed these advanced secret space programs, accepted an offer from the US to have other nations come together in a joint cooperative program to basically come up with a better defense for planet Earth, where the top scientists from every country would collaborate in this new program, and it was going to be called the Global Galactic League of Nations, which is quite a mouthful, but that's what Corey says he read in this smart glass pad. And it described the major nations that up until that time, such as India, Brazil, China, South Africa, other countries that weren't part of the secret space programs that were then operational, that they would all come together and they would cooperate in this Galactic League of Nations program, which would operate outside of our solar system. And so this was what directly led to the end of the Cold War. And I think historically, when we look at why the Cold War ended, most scholars don't know why. And I think that the explanation Goode gives, that this was because behind the scenes, all of the major nations, including Russia, China, all agreed to participate in this secret space program that would be run by the United Nations, where the US would basically share its most advanced space technologies. That this was something that was going to help bring humanity together, and in the long term help humanity develop a long-term defense against hostile extraterrestrials.
Interesting. Go ahead, Sash.
Okay, this is just to shift a little bit. I've done a series of interviews with Len Kasdan about how basically Paperclip brought back the top Nazis, and that Kennedy has deliberately had set up the Defense Information Agency as a counter to the Nazi-infested CIA that Allen Dulles was running, and that this was part, I read in your book, of what actually got him killed. And I wonder if you could talk some more about how did this desire to go public on the ET presence get Kennedy killed?
Well, yes, that's a very important part of this whole big picture of what is it that Kennedy was trying to do during his administration. There are a number of leaked documents that point out that Kennedy was actually trying to get information about UFOs and about the operations of Majestic 12, that he wanted to cooperate with the Soviet Union in sharing information about UFOs, and that he was very interested in joint space programs. What isn't well known is that Kennedy was actually very familiar with the extraterrestrial element, as well as the Nazi space program that had been developed during the Second World War and the Nazis in Antarctica, because actually Kennedy in 1945 went to Germany and was part of a tour by the then Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal, who was really the principal person not only in setting up Operation Paperclip, and also then setting up Majestic 12. So James Forrestal really was the key person in putting together a coordinated US response to deal with the Nazis having developed the secret space program, the Nazis having developed agreements with reptilian extraterrestrials, and the Nazis having then gone to Antarctica, and that all of this information was being basically now being acted upon by the U.S. national security system. So Forrestal was all aware of that, and it had included Kennedy in that very important phase where a lot of the German technologies were being assessed in terms of their suitability or their role in the Navy developing a long-term response to all of these challenges. And then after that, Kennedy becomes a congressman. He continued his friendship with Forrestal, who continued to share information with Kennedy. And so when Kennedy became president, now he had a detailed knowledge of what was really going on. So when he was denied access in 1961 by Allen Dulles to the operations of Majestic 12, and denied access to classified UFO files that the CIA had, Kennedy was not going to take no for an answer, because he knew what was involved here. And so he really kind of moved heaven and earth, I believe, to gain access, and that led to him ultimately coming up with this program to cooperate with the Soviet Union in joint space operations and sharing files on UFOs, because he knew that would be the thing that would actually break the information monopoly that Majestic 12 and the CIA had on these UFOs and secret space programs.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So he was going ahead with this. He was trying to undercut Dulles and his whole agency, and somehow make this public. And how did it? And who shot him? Why?
Right. Well, this is the thing: is that Dulles was at that time he was the head of Majestic 12 as well as being the head of the CIA. Now Kennedy sacked Dulles as the head of the CIA in November of 1961, but Dulles was still the head of Majestic 12, and so in that role, basically Majestic decided that they were not going to allow Kennedy to get access to any of this information. And one of the things that Dulles did was that he drafted a set of directives, 8 directives. They're called the Majestic directives, that basically outlined how Majestic 12 would respond to the attempts by the Kennedy administration to gain access to these classified UFO files. And one of the directives it's called Project Environment, was a cryptic assassination directive.
Wow.
And that basically was put in the hands of the head of the CIA's counterintelligence, which was James Jesus Angleton. And Angleton's job was to basically implement this assassination directive against any official in the Kennedy administration, including Kennedy himself, who basically represented a threat to Majestic operations. And so when Kennedy was on the verge of having agreements between the Soviet Union and the US to share information on classified UFO files and collaborate in space programs, that's when Angleton used this Project Environment directive to authorize the assassination of Kennedy. And there's a document.
Wow.
There's a document that actually shows that that Angleton actually was implementing the Majestic directives in response to Kennedy's request for the CIA director, John McCone, in 1963. This was the director who replaced Dulles. That Kennedy's memorandum to the CIA in November of 1963 directed McCone to share classified UFO files with NASA, who would then share it with the Soviet Union. That there's handwriting there which basically directly implicated Angleton, because the handwriting was by William Colby, who later became a CIA director, and that handwriting basically said Angleton has the MJ-12 directive, and so that handwriting clearly implicates that this is how the CIA was going to respond to Kennedy's memo to John McCone, the CIA director, to share classified UFO files with NASA. That the CIA's response was going to be done through Angleton, who was going to use who was going to use a Majestic directive. And so that document really is the smoking gun that Kennedy was assassinated by an MJ-12 group that had strong ties with the CIA.
Oh my gosh. And did McCone realize that he was ordering the execution, that he was passing that order on?
I don't think McCone knew exactly what was going on. I think McCone was put in position by Kennedy, and because of that, he probably was not in the loop on what these classified UFOs were all about. And so essentially when he was sent this directive by Kennedy in November, it was dated November 12, 1963. Kennedy was assassinated 10 days later. McCone didn't know what to do about it. He said, well, who do I direct this to? And he basically asked other CIA officers, William Colby, what do I do with this? And Colby's handwriting basically said, well, it's okay. This is something that Angleton will look after because Angleton has these Majestic directives to deal with this kind of issue.
Wow.
So, you said earlier that Reagan was briefed on the extraterrestrial part of the extraterrestrial as existence. What did they brief? Did they brief everybody in between Kennedy and Reagan, and did they brief them since? What's your information on that?
I think that the briefings are very selective. That I think after the Kennedy assassination, Lyndon Johnson was someone who actually was a long-term operative for the Majestic 12 group. He was actually a part of the team that assassinated James Forrestal, who was the Secretary of Defense shortly before his assassination in, I believe it was March 1949. So this was Johnson was a long time MJ12 operative, so he would have been given whatever information MJ12 thought was necessary. I think this is the way they approach different presidents. They provide whatever information they feel they need to know. It's kind of done on a need-to-know basis. Jimmy Carter, before I get to Carter, Nixon was Eisenhower's vice president, and Nixon was actually very well informed about the whole extraterrestrial phenomenon. And I think that this is something that the Majestic 12 people weren't very comfortable with, and so I think they were involved in the kind of Watergate scandal. That this was something that I think Nixon was set up. This is something that it's very controversial, but I think this is how Majestic 12 operates. That they use their operatives to set people up who might be a threat, and Nixon was a threat. Because Nixon knew too much. Right. That was the problem with Nixon. He knew too much. Nixon was then replaced, or Carter then was elected. Soon after, Gerald Ford replaced Nixon, but then Ford was beaten by Carter in the 1976 elections. Carter had UFO sightings and said that he would get to the bottom of it, but he was given a briefing where essentially he just backed off. So they told him enough to kind of like get him to go silent. So I think they might have told Carter something along the lines that, if you tell the public the truth about extraterrestrials, it'll shatter world religions. Something, and Carter was a devout Baptist. And so that was enough to get Carter to back off. And then, of course, you have Reagan in 1980, and then George Bush. And George Bush was also a long-time CIA MJ12 operative, so he knew information. And then, of course, you have Clinton in 1980 being elected. And Clinton very famously tried to find out as much as he could, but he was shut out of the loop.
Okay. And then what about now? What about Obama?
Obama, I think that what happened at the very beginning in Obama being elected in 2008, 2009, the role and the people he selected for key positions, I think that he was being used, or he had been given the kind of tap on the shoulder by certain groups to play a key role in disclosing some of this information. Some of the key people that he had appointed, John Podesta, who was the head of his transition team, a Marine General, James Jones, who was his national security advisor, and there were others that were knowledgeable about the ET issue that were going to brief Obama enough so that he could then disclose what was going on. And if you look at the very beginning of Obama's administration, he came out with a whole kind of set of directives and presidential executive orders to really move the government transparency agenda forward in a meaningful way. But I think what happened with Obama was that behind the scenes, he was shut down. His operation was shut down, and so Obama wasn't able to move forward. I don't think Obama knew all that much about the ET issue, other than that the UFO phenomenon is very real, that it involves advanced technologies, and that the release of some of these technologies would replace the fossil fuel industry. I think he was kind of briefed to that level, and that was what he was going to disclose, but was stopped.
It was really interesting. We interviewed Andy Bashaga, who said that Obama, who, when he was Barry Soetoro, was with him on the Mars jump room program, and there was other witnesses too, and that Barry, unlike Andy, became a CIA employee, and Andy has got a lot of evidence, and it seems quite probable that Obama knows a hell of a lot more than he lets on.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because Andy's testimony is really very significant. At first, I was kind of on the fence as far as Andy's testimony is concerned, because it was very controversial, especially when it came to Obama. But the fact is that there have been 3 other whistleblowers who have come forward to confirm that Barack Obama, Barry Soetoro, was actually part of this CIA jump room project. Brett Stillings, that there's also more recently William Whitecrow, I believe it is. Then Bernard Mendez was a third one. So that's 4 people that say that Barack Obama, when he was at Occidental College in Los Angeles around 1980-81, was actually part of this classified CIA program involving the use of jump room technologies to Mars. And so I think it's very, very possible that Andy is completely correct that Obama was part of this classified program. Now, how much does Obama know? He probably knows a lot about the way in which the CIA operates. There's a whole lot of questions about, to what extent is Obama his own man as opposed to a CIA operative? In a way, I think Obama, he is very knowledgeable to a certain extent. If Andy's revelations are accurate, and I think they probably are, but on the other hand, Obama as president had a certain degree of authority or autonomy to kind of move forward on these disclosures, but he was shut down. So maybe it's because the control file on him, basically can be used. And as I'm sure you've probably come across that kind of idea that any successful politician in the US or any major country typically has a control file where the powers behind the scene can basically manipulate that politician because they can threaten to release very incriminating information in the control file.
Yes.
Right. Lately, Steve Bassett and Grant Cameron are following a theory that Obama will probably reveal the disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence on Earth, and that'll lead into Hillary being the first post-disclosure era president. What do you think of? Yeah,
Steve said that Obama will just say, yes, the president has been briefed, but we'll let President Hillary Clinton decide what is in the interest of national security and must still be classified and what she can tell you.
Right. We have about 2 minutes before the break. So what do you think of that?
Well,
I
think that that's epiphenomenal. Barack Obama, whoever the president of the US is, making a disclosure announcement that, yes, at some point they will, whether it's Obama, whether it's Hillary Clinton. But that's not the real reason why disclosure is being made. It's not because a president has suddenly kind of like, gotten the courage up to, kind of like get this information and release it. It's because behind the scenes, there have been agreements, or there have been forces or tectonic shifts in the way in which power has been kind of like differentiated amongst these different groups, Majestic 12, corporations, the Illuminati, secret space programs, that deals have been reached, or that one side has emerged triumphant, and that side is now dictating the disclosure agenda. And I think that that the biggest sign that there has been a fundamental sea change is the Brexit vote, that Britain deciding to leave the European Union. I think that's a big sign that the project to use the European Union as a model for setting up a world government has failed, and that the British are now basically at the front in joining Russia and other BRICS nations in coming up with a greater transparency in what's really going on.
Nice.
Well, that's probably a really good place to break for our next segment of the show after this commercial break. There's our music, and we will be back in about 3 minutes. Thank you very much for listening to The Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I'm your host, Jennifer Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lessin, and we have been interviewing the incredible Dr. Michael-Salla. But before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to that donation button on freedomslips.com and make your donation. $1, $5, $15, $20, $100, whatever you can afford will be greatly appreciated. And Thomas, Ahmad, any specials this week?
No, ma'am. Just
no.
We need your money.
Need your money, honey. Go and donate, please, please, please. All right, thank you, Saj. What would you like to say?
This is a great interview, Michael. I absolutely love what you're doing, and what I get is that there's some expectation, not just of these social rearrangement, but some kind of cataclysmic events that Corey and the people that he is communicating with are expecting. And this ascension, or what in the world is really happening on the bigger picture?
We left with the Brexit vote and the politics behind that, and the negotiation and deals have been reached, and people have come up on different power positions. Go ahead, Michael, tell us more.
Well, the Brexit vote was very significant because one of the things about the European Union is that it really has been, from the very inception, a mechanism by which the remnants of Nazi Germany were able to reassert their power, their influence through German industrialists, through Nazi enclaves in Antarctica and the secret space program that was set up by the Nazis called the Dark Fleet, and that ultimately the European Union and groups like the Bilderberg Group, which was a kind of cooperative effort between European industrialists and American industrialists who were all working with this Nazi Fourth Reich, because the Nazis, even though they lost the Second World War, the battle, they continued, but with their cooperation with the reptilians, with the draconians in Antarctica, they were able to re-establish themselves and basically covertly influence or take over the US military-industrial complex, and to basically use the European Union as a front for the Fourth Reich. And basically, if you look at the way in which the European Union was organized, where real power was with this European Commission, which was really an appointed body. It wasn't in any way democratic. And that this was the only body in the European Union that could propose laws. And so this was really a very clever way for the Fourth Reich to set up a system whereby you wouldn't have elected politicians making laws. It would be appointed bureaucrats. And this would be a way in which you could actually set up a kind of one world government, which would really be a facade for basically a totalitarian fascist Nazi system called the Fourth Reich. And I think that was the plan, that the European Union was going to be the model for this Fourth Reich to go global. And even though there are countries like Russia, China, Brazil, the BRICS nations who were opposed to this agenda, they recently have been under a lot of pressure. But the fact that Britain has decided to vote against the European Union to continue being a member of that means that now you have a really major defection from this kind of Fourth Reich. A major nation has defected, and so now Britain is joining the kind of BRICS nations, and I think that this is having a spillover effect. I think, for example, what we saw in Turkey that just happened this weekend in terms of an attempted coup, I think that was another example in which you have behind the scenes groups that are very concerned about defections in this Fourth Reich, that the role of Turkey was to basically help this destruction in Syria moving forward. That Turkey's role was to basically undermine the state of Syria and to bring about this kind of Armageddon in Syria. But very recently, Erdogan basically did a 180. He decided that he would start cooperating with Russia, cooperating with the Israelis, that he even started to talk about recognizing the Syrian state. And then you have this attempted coup, and I think that was an attempt by this kind of Fourth Reich element to really rein in Erdogan. So in that sense, I think Erdogan actually successfully opposing this coup actually is a good thing. Because this is a sign that this kind of Fourth Reich continues to lose power, continue to lose the ability to influence major nations to pursue destructive policies that allow this Fourth Reich to move forward with its agenda to establish a kind of global New World Order, which is a kind of facade for this kind of reptilian Nazi alliance.
Wow. Sash. Okay. So, what can we do? What can the individuals do? What can we do? We have an election coming up. What do you see unfolding here? Is there any way that we can kind of bring forth the golden age, the light side of the force, however you symbol it? What can we do individually and collectively?
Well, I think you've been doing that already, Janet. You and Sasha, you're doing this show. You've been doing that. You're the voice of the alternative media. You get this information out there, and in getting this information out there, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, the kind of alternative community. We are a very powerful community and growing. And while we're only kind of like a small kind of proportion of the alternative media that are talking about these topics, that the alternative media overall, when you throw in groups like, the Alex Jones InfoWars crowd and Breitbart and all of these groups that make up the alternative media, this is kind of, we're talking, like really tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world that are embracing alternative ways of understanding what's going on around us. When it comes to the ET element, we are at the vanguard of that. We're the tip of the spear because we're the ones that are informed about that. And when people start to wake up, start to kind of like accept that, there is an extraterrestrial element to the way in which world politics is conducted, that secret space programs are real. They go to shows like yours, they buy books like my book, Insiders Reveal, Secret Space Programs, and they get informed about these issues because I think ultimately, and this is what Corey Goode says is the main message coming from the Blue Avians, is that it's our collective consciousness that is going to make the decision about how disclosure happens, how much disclosure, the extent to which disclosure occurs. That's all going to be determined by the mass consciousness. And so the alternative media, we are the ones that are revealing this to people, that this is disclosure, because often people say, and I totally agree with what Sasha said, that in the case of, say, my book, that this is disclosure, because yes, people who buy that book and read it, there's a whole lot of new information in there that is going to be new for them. So it's going to be disclosure for them, because disclosure is really all about just awakening to this. For me, disclosure happened for me for the first time in 2001 when I listened to Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project. That's when a lot of this information was, I accepted it as real then. And, over the years there have been more disclosures, but for me that was my awakening. Today we are having hundreds of thousands, millions of people awaken in their own unique way, whether it's listening to your show, buying my book, watching Stephen Bassett's citizen hearings. Disclosure is happening to people in their own unique way, and once it happens, it's like you're awakened, and then you're able to go further down the track in integrating new information. And I think that's something we just do. We do because everyone listening to this show now, you know how much of this information resonates with you, what's real. Maybe you accept 50% of the information Corey Goode is putting out as real, or maybe it's 20%, or maybe it's 90%. It doesn't really matter. It's whatever you feel is real. It's your responsibility to tell your friends, your loved ones that, hey, this is what's going on. And as you tell that person and as you awaken them or help them awaken to what's going on, this is how we move the disclosure process forward. And I think it's very much a grassroots, citizen-driven effort, and it's happening right now, and it's a global phenomenon.
You know, I would definitely tend to agree with you. In a way, it's like there's something called simulation theory, that basically the synchronicities are so great that people like you and me and Janet and Corey, who are moved to take the position that we take, it's almost like there's some greater plan. Tolstoy once talked about Napoleon not leading a nation, but being a bubble on the wave of French expansionism. And I think that we are chosen, and I bet you, whether you remember it or not, that you have had a direct extraterrestrial experience. Do you remember anything like that, Michael?
In my case, I think it was just an awakening. I think that there was something within me that made me kind of open to this information, and it kind of happened pretty late for me. It happened in 2001 when I was already a professional. I was a professor at a university teaching international politics when I had my awakening. So, I was in my early 40s at that time, and that was something that changed my life. And I think it's something that people are going to go through their own awakening process, that is really unique to them.
Okay, but one of the things that I got from what you said is that a surfeit of information and data sort of percolated through your intellect, that somehow you had gotten enough information that you were open to getting the bigger picture, to rising beyond the data and seeing how it all fit together.
Well, that's exactly right, because I began my career in international politics back in 1989. That's when I began, a PhD program. I began writing papers, writing books, attending conferences, and then when I got my academic appointments. And I was interested in international politics. That was my field, and in particular, world conflict. What is it that drives international conflict? And the more I wrapped my mind around that, the more I reached the same position that William Bramley reached in his book, The Gods of Eden, that behind the scenes we have a third force manipulating international politics to perpetuate conflict at a global level. I reached that position intellectually. That was an intellectual journey. So in 2001, I was ready for the information Stephen Greer had with the Disclosure Project, because I had already understood that there was something that was really driving the international politics to perpetuate these conflicts. And Greer, with his Disclosure Project witnesses, gave me the answer I was seeking. And so a new phase began for me, and I had to research what these different whistleblowers had said and kind of really understand the international implications of it all. But at the end of that process, it took me about 20 months to really study Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project witness testimonies, the other information I was reading on the internet at the time, with the information I'd gotten through my international politics career, to then come up with this field of exopolitics at the beginning of 2003, which is when I launched the exopolitics.org website.
Excellent.
Cool.
I have a question here. Do you have another one?
I have another one, but you can get your turn first.
Okay, what I wanted to go back and talk about was your book is called Secret Space Programs and Extraterrestrial Alliances. Excuse me, alliances. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more. What are the alliances out there? Are there dark alliances, light alliances, some with humanity, the good side? And also, how did Corey actually meet the Blue Aliens for the first time?
Right. Well, those are really big issues, Janet. These alliances, they go back a long, long time. there are extraterrestrial groups that have been visiting us for hundreds of thousands of years. As you know, with your work with the Anunnaki, you can go back to the Sumerians, and you can see that the Sumerians were working with some extraterrestrial groups that were helping them develop their technologies. We see the same phenomenon with the Egyptians. The Temple of Abydos shows quite clearly that the Egyptians had established very highly advanced technologies. Again, there were extraterrestrial alliances that the Egyptians had. And so we go back to the beginning of human history, and we can find many different alliances between ancient cultures or ancient civilizations on the earth with one group of extraterrestrials or another group of extraterrestrials. And this continues to the very moment, to this very time. Now, as far as the information Corey has revealed, it kind of dovetails with some of the information Alex Collier has revealed, that Corey and Alex both focus on 22 different extraterrestrial civilizations that have genetically left a kind of a footprint in the human DNA, and that each of these groups of extraterrestrials have established alliances with one human civilization or one particular ethnic or racial group or another. And so up until the very present, we've got this very ancient set of kind of relationships between different ethnic groups or racial groups on the planet with different ET groups. Now, what I find very interesting in the modern era is that we've had a political alliance between the Nazis and the reptilians, which is very different to the kind of alliances in the past, which were more genetically kind of based, because I think that the connection between the Draconians and the Nazis wasn't so much racial; it was more ideological. That the Nazis and the Draconian reptilians shared a similar ideology in terms of racial supremacy, in terms of a kind of like a master-slave way of looking at not only the world, but looking at the galaxy. And so they decided that they would form an alliance. And this was something that was known to the intelligence agencies of the US and Britain in particular. And so they monitored this so that even though the Nazis didn't win the Second World War through their alliance with the reptilians, and there were reasons why that didn't happen, still they survived in Antarctica, and they had sufficient time to weaponize the technologies that the reptilians had given them, so that eventually they were then able to basically overtake the technological military firepower of the US, of Britain, of the Soviet Union, and then basically move forward in their agenda to develop a covert Fourth Reich. But the big piece in this covert Fourth Reich was this alliance between the reptilians and the Draconians. And on the other side of the ledger, you got Britain and you got the US and you got the Soviet Union, who are very concerned about this reptilian Nazi alliance. Deals were made. Certain aspects of the US military-industrial complex were basically brought in on this alliance, but others stayed on the periphery of this. And this is where you had other groups of ETs, like the Nordic extraterrestrials, working with the US Navy to develop a viable secret space program that the Navy would have that would one day challenge the Nazi reptilian space fleets that had been developed. The Nordics also worked with the Soviet Union, closely with the Soviet Union to help the Russians develop their own indigenous space program, which could be used as a counter to the reptilian Nazi alliance. So yes, these extraterrestrial alliances are very important for understanding, really the big picture in what's driving global politics.
I was interested in when Ku Klux Klan, or Toth, also known as Ningishita, left in 311 BCE, and he said he was going to come back and so forth. He had left lots of evidence of educated space traveling Mayans like Lord Pikal, and I can't remember if it was Corey Goode, but somebody had said there was actually an advanced Mayan spacefaring civilization that was even rescuing some of the Earthling slaves that had been taken by the hostiles. Could you relate to that a little?
Sure. Well, that actually was a very important part of Corey's testimony that helped me accept Corey as a genuine whistleblower, because I actually had, in 2010, when I was visiting Mexico City, I was actually approached by someone who belonged to a secret Mayan space program, and they wanted to recruit me. They wanted me to basically be a part of that. And this was the first time I'd ever heard of a Mayan secret space program, so I didn't talk about it because that was the only time that I had heard of this. And then in 2015, Corey began talking about a secret Mayan space program. And that was that was the first time anyone else was talking about this Mayan space program. And Corey talked about his own experiences with them dating from 2011. So this was a year after I had my own experience in Mexico City, or encounter in Mexico City. A year after that, Corey was put in touch with this Mayan secret space program, and they helped him deal with some of the issues that he had, and then Corey in 2015 began talking about the Mayan secret space program, his own personal experiences with it, as well as what he found in reading about it in the smart glass pads. So yes, this Mayan secret space program is really something that grew out of the Mayan civilization that had developed these advanced spacefaring technologies, but the Mayans were able to maintain a good harmony or a balance between advanced technologies and spirituality, higher ethics, which meant that when they developed their space program and they went into deep space, that they were able to develop alliances with some of the more positive groups. And apparently the alliances that they established was with the Pleiadians, and that the Mayans actually were able to establish bases in the Pleiadian star system. That they have bases there where they have millions of people in these colonies, in these Mayan colonies. And when they are helping humans on Earth who have been abducted or severely traumatized by these different programs, or been used in a secret slave trade, a galactic slave trade, when the Mayans rescue these people, they take them to these Mayan bases in the Pleiades to kind of like help these people recover or, get over their trauma. So this is their specialty, and I think that they are going to be one of the major groups that are going to come forward and help humanity deal with the truth of extraterrestrial contact and these secret space programs.
Wow, that's great. I wanted to ask more about the experiencers and about the genetic makeup of Homo sapiens sapiens. Did you say something earlier that there were 22 species that have contributed DNA to human beings? Is that did I hear that correctly? And what are they doing with these? Now there are millions of experiencers coming forward that are having contact.
And making hybrids.
And the hybrid children. Could you tell us more about our makeup and what's coming out of the the next generation of hybridization?
Sure. Well, as far as I can tell from the information that's come from, these different sources, Corey Goode, Alex Collier, Arthur Horn wrote a really interesting book, Humanity's Extraterrestrial Origins, that looked at some of the startup. As in terms of synthesizing all of that, essentially there was human civilizations that had been established here as far back as 80 million years ago that were part of this kind of ancient builder civilization that had been established in our local galactic cluster. And that eventually what happened was that due to wars in the local galactic cluster, a defense grid that had been built by this ancient builder race millions of years ago, that collapsed. And so basically around the time of the destruction of the superplanet Marduk, which can be traced to around 400,000 years ago, 500,000 years ago, that's what Corey says, that I think that was the time when you actually had this defense grid for our local galactic cluster basically collapsing, and then you had many different extraterrestrial groups coming in, and that's when the genetic experiments or the genetic farming began on Earth. So roughly around 400, 500,000 years ago, up until that time, really humanity's bloodline was pretty, shall we say, kind of very untainted by different extraterrestrial groups. But then around 400,000 years ago or so, then these different extraterrestrial groups came in and bringing in their genetics and mixing it into humanity to kind of like deal with all sorts of global contingencies at the time. We had cataclysms, minor floods, major floods, pole shifts, all of these things. And each time surface humanity would be devastated. Some elites would go underground and set up a new kind of underground civilization. What was left on the surface would rebuild with ET groups and ancient human civilizations from the subterranean area coming forward and helping. You had a kind of real mishmash of different groups. But what was happening was that the racial genetics was being mixed more and more on the surface of humanity. And so what we have now on the surface of humanity is a real mix of different ET races, their genetics with our human genetics that go back millions of years. And then in these subterranean civilizations, some of these groups have very pure bloodlines going back millions of years that are untainted by these ET visitors who came in and mixed their genetics. Now, and this is where there's a big kind of debate. Well, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Is this kind of pure racial bloodline going all the way back to these ancient builder races that basically oversaw what was a very peaceful kind of transplanetary culture in this local galactic cluster that was peaceful and protected because people were in alignment, or civilizations were in alignment with this ancient builder race, or is what the different ET groups have brought in terms of their kind of ideologies and their genetics, is this something that is augmenting us or improving us in some way? There's a big debate there. I don't have the answer to that, but certainly that's what Corey has said, that there are big debates in these behind-the-scenes negotiations between the secret space programs and these ancient human subterranean civilizations.
Your turn, Sash.
Okay, yeah. One of the interesting things about these civilizations with the Vril Society's craft, and the craft that the German scientists have been able to create, and the stuff they brought down to New Schwabenland was not anything like what greeted Byrd in the Battle of the Weddell Sea. This was a more advanced craft of the Bodlanders, I guess, that sent a lot of our ships down and shot most of the planes down. And what I liked about your book is that you explained the propulsion systems and the mixed propulsion systems that are used in the different kinds of craft, and you gave drawings that an intelligent 12-year-old could follow about how anti-grav craft can change direction, what are the dynamics of travel within the solar system and beyond. And if you could just summarize what the secret transport, the ones that are going faster than light are doing, and the in-between ones, that would be really useful.
Sure. Well, this was something that goes back to the Nazis, who were the first. Well, actually, the Nazis and the Italians were cooperating on this. This is something that isn't that well known, that the Italians also had their own secret space program that was headed by Marconi, and that relocated to South America. But what we know most about is the Nazi program, because the Nazis did try to weaponize the flying saucers, putting cannons on them and so forth. But the problem is that it's a completely different physics. The rockets, it's based on Newtonian physics. You put a projectile in there and you expel it out at tremendous force through an explosion, and it goes out and it hits a target. The flying saucers were using kind of plasma physics, where you have high rotating plasma going around very, very quickly around some kind of circular orbit, and that's why you have kind of like a ring or flying saucers. It's not accidental that they have a circular component in them. Whether it's a flying saucer design or a cigar-shaped design, there is typically a ring where you have something spinning at a very high rotation, and that provides that has an anti-gravity effect that basically reduces the weight of that craft quite dramatically. And so once the weight of that craft is reduced, we're talking anywhere from 97%, which is a tremendous reduction. If you reduce the weight of anything by 97%, if you reduced your weight, or anyone listening to this, if you reduced your weight by 97%, and now you would just kind of jump up in the air, you'd be like, John Carter John Carter of Mars. You'd be able to kind of leap up hundreds of feet. So this was something that the Nazis were doing in the Second World War, that they were using these principles of high rotating plasma. But the thing was that the two physics don't come together smoothly. You can't just have a high rotating plasma going around a flying saucer, which has a kind of rotational component to it, and just stick a cannon on there and think it's going to work. And they're very different physics, and so the Nazis were not able to successfully kind of harmonize those two sets of principles in time.
So wait. This, Michael, is how the Picard had to put down his shields in order to fire. And it's really just a fictionalized way of saying the same thing you're saying about the incompatibility of the two systems. But go on, this is fantastic.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah, there is a fundamental incompatibility. You're trying to kind of combine Newtonian physics with non-Newtonian physics. It just doesn't work, and that's what the Nazis were trying to do to win the war. They tried to weaponize these flying saucers so that they could win the war, but they just couldn't harmonize the two principles. And so, as it became clear that the war was now lost in Europe, they moved as much as they could to Antarctica to continue doing the research, and eventually they were able to solve the problem, so that by the time Admiral Byrd launched his high jump expedition in 1946-47, the Nazis were now able to they now had weaponized flying saucers. So when Admiral Byrd's expedition went down there, the flying saucers now could be used as a weapon of war. And so that's why the Nazis, after the war, now could basically intimidate the US Navy and the US military-industrial complex into basically a covert surrender. And so after Operation High Jump in 1947, and then you had the Nazis doing the overflights of major American cities in 1952. And that's when the Truman administration and the Eisenhower administration were basically forced to sign agreements with the Nazis, where the U.S. military-industrial complex and what the Nazis had set up in Antarctica would basically seamlessly merge together. And even though the Eisenhower administration and the kind of like U.S. military-industrial complex thought that they could outsmart the Nazis, really the writing was on the wall, because the Nazis were working very closely with the reptilians, and they were ruthless. And so, ultimately they were able to outmaneuver the military-industrial complex and utilize personnel and resources for the creation of this dark fleet, which was really the kind of development of the Nazi secret space program. It grew into the dark fleet that Corey talks about at length in his disclosures, and I have a chapter on that in the book. The dark fleet established bases on Mars, bases on the moon, and then starts building these interstellar battle groups that would join with the Draconians in interstellar conquest. So that was all done with the collusion and cooperation with the U.S. military-industrial complex, because the U.S. had no kind of means of stopping the dark fleet from doing what it was doing. The only hope was that while they helped the dark fleet in moving forward with their kind of interstellar plans, that the U.S. military-industrial complex would be able to develop its own secret space program through the U.S. Navy. And eventually they did, but it took 40 years, it took a good 30 years from the time the agreements were reached in the early 1950s to the time the Navy was able to deploy its first battle groups in the 1980s. So in that 30 years, the Dark Fleet was able to continue to develop and continue to put out there a lot of advanced technologies. So in the 1980s, you have the Navy moving forward with its solar-warden program, but it wasn't as advanced as the Dark Fleet. And it was only in the in the late 1990s and the early 2000s that you actually had the Navy's solar-warden program clearly differentiating or separating itself from the Dark Fleet and the corporations that were working with the Dark Fleet, and they went their separate ways. And then with the intervention of the Sphere Being Alliance, who basically then were able to give more advanced technologies to the solar-warden program, that kind of leveled the playing field. And then solar-warden basically went on the offensive, and that's when you actually had incidents like the solar-warden secret space program attacking Dark Fleet assets or Dark Fleet bases, or attacking bases that belong to a corporate space program on Mars and elsewhere in our solar system.
So what is the ultimate goal of the Dark Fleet? Do they want to totally subjugate humanity to the point we have no free will? Do they keep us believing that we have choices and free will? So, I mean, I think it would be boring to control somebody that has absolutely no self-sense, or, you know, they'd just be a bunch of Borgs. Are they trying to Borg us, or do they want us to have some illusion that we have individuality and we have choice, or something in between?
Well, I think what we can see in terms of the way in which the Dark Fleet is operated and the way in which the Draconians operate is that they operate through subterfuge and covert means, that they're very happy to just manipulate leaders in order to get the resources that they want for their plans of interstellar conflict. And so if you look at, how did the Nazis, or how did the reptilians do it on Earth? They basically encouraged Hitler to move forward with his plans for conquest and gave him some technologies to encourage him in this plan, and then kind of like switched over from an overt plan of planetary conquest to a covert plan of interplanetary conquest, so that they could kind of like utilize Earth resources for their wider goals of galactic conquest. So I think that this is the program, and this is the way in which the reptilians operate. That either overtly or covertly, they reach agreements with certain factions of different planets for that faction to get more control, more influence, and then kind of manipulate that faction. As they manipulated the Nazis, they manipulate that faction to establish itself as a great power, whether it's done overtly or whether it's done covertly. With the Nazis, first it was done overtly with the Third Reich in Germany, and then it was done covertly with this Fourth Reich operating out of Antarctica. And I think this is the modus vivendi of the modus operandi of the Draconians, that they're very comfortable in manipulating worlds like ours, where there are these factional differences or different nation states where leaders of one nation state can be encouraged to reach agreements with the reptilians. And so this is the formula by which they operate, and I think that this is something that they can continue to use in other solar systems.
I have one more question back to Sash, just a quick one. This is about the inner Earth people. Since they are not exposed to radiation, or it's different radiation, do they live longer? Are they stronger than the people above the Earth, or actually are they weaker in some ways, since we are able to, tolerate radiation and survive? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, they definitely have been able to shield themselves from the most destructive aspects of life on the surface of the planet. Whether it's radiation from all sorts of sources, whether it's the sun, whether it's radioactivity, whether it's kind of artificially created poisons in the atmosphere, or toxins in vegetation, whatever it is, that the subterranean races have been able to shield themselves from that, so that they've created these bubbles, and in these bubbles, or these civilizations that they've been able to establish in very large caverns in the kind of interior of the Earth, the kind of the honeycomb Earth is the way in which Corey describes it. That they have been able to establish civilizations which are very long-lived, where people live for thousands and thousands of years, where their consciousness is untainted. And, this is where we get into the kind of more spiritual elements. People like Jane Robertson, the Seth material, or the Ra material, or those that talk about the importance of freeing our mind from belief systems that kind of like are self-limiting in some way, that the inner Earth beings, that is how they're raised. They're raised like that from birth. They're taught these things. They're taught the things that Seth taught Jane Roberts' followers, or that the Ra group taught Carla Ruka through the Ra material. And there are others, of course, who also have very elevated teachings. So you can imagine a civilization that teaches these spiritual truths from the very beginning. And so that way you have children or a civilization who psychically are very, very powerful. And this was one of the things that distinguished the book by Edward Bulwer Lytton back in, I think it was 1877, when he wrote that book, Vril, The Coming Race. It was because these civilizations, the subterranean civilizations, understood these spiritual principles, so that they psychically were very highly developed, and they also had these advanced technologies that psychically they could use. So they're very powerful beings, and so yes, their societies go back hundreds of thousands or millions of years, and they are very long-lived. And from our perspective, they would be incredible.
Thank you. So some stuff I've read and heard is that the Dalai Lama was the representative some of the had direct contact with people in Agartha, with the inner Earth, and that he was sort of a person that operated with knowledge from both worlds. I wonder if that applies to the current Dalai Lama, and whether you heard anything about like that.
Well, Tibetan Buddhism and the Dalai Lama, that's a very fascinating topic when it comes to this whole thing of secret space programs, because again, this takes us back to the Nazi regime, because they actually sponsored expeditions to Tibet to kind of like extract a lot of the ancient information that the Tibetans had about secret space programs and higher consciousness and meditation, because the Nazi SS, especially their society, the Ahnenerbe Society, which was the educational division of the SS, that they understood that it wasn't just a matter of developing these sophisticated technologies, that there was also a mental component to that, and that the Tibetans could help in that regard. And so particular groups of the Tibetans began collaborating with the Nazis, with the Nazi SS in particular. This was the Bon group, the Bon religion, who are not followers of the Dalai Lama. So they shared a lot of this technology with the Nazi SS. And, that was something that was very peculiar about the Nazi regime, that they had these Tibetan monks that were working with the Nazi SS in developing kind of various religious, spiritual practices so that they could develop these advanced technologies. As far as the Dalai Lama is concerned, yes, he's worked with some of these Earth civilizations with the Agartha group, and that knowledge, that information is something which is very restricted, very secretive. The Dalai Lama hasn't talked about it openly, but certainly he's aware of it, and certainly the Tibetans are a very good bridge between our society and this inner Earth, one of these inner Earth civilizations who are working with the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans.
In your book, you say that the full disclosure of secret space programs and extraterrestrial alliances will unshackle the chains of deception holding humanity back from reaching its highest potential as galactic citizens. We've got about 9 or 10 minutes left. Can you tell our listeners more about how we can become these galactic citizens and how this is going to, in your mind, unfold based on what Corey and Randy and others have told you?
Okay, it's very interesting. I remember one of the people I studied for my PhD was a Brazilian Archbishop, Dom Helder Camara, and he had this saying that he said, when one person dreams, it's only a dream. When thousands of people dream, it's the beginning of a new reality. And I think this is what disclosure of the secret space programs does. Basically, it enables us to dream bigger. It enables us to go beyond this kind of self-limiting belief system that organizations like NASA has, that, while the best we can do is maybe, in 30 years have a kind of manned mission to Mars or get to the asteroids or something, that as we disclose this information, that people now see the truth. They recognize the truth, and now people can start to dream, and that you can dream that, wow, I can become, or my children can become, or my grandchildren can become part of this kind of galactic space culture. That what we see in the Star Trek series is a reality that we can manifest now, because we know that it's happening, that it has happened, that we are a galactic culture, but it's only been restricted to a tiny percentage of the planet. But that as this information is released, we collectively start to dream, that we start to make this possible at a planetary level. So now we will, in a very short period of time, through our ability to dream bigger or imagine at a much larger scale, we will collectively manifest a galactic culture. And I think this is what the disclosures of people like Corey Goode, Randy Kramer, Bill Tompkins, and others like them are doing. And what I hope my book does is that it introduces this reality of secret space programs actually existing right now, and that the more we disclose and share information about that, the more we can collectively manifest a new global culture which makes us a galactic civilization.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned Star Trek, because this is the 50-year anniversary of the Star Trek series. The new Star Trek comes out on, I think, the 23rd of this month, just in a couple of days. So do you, with all this information, if it comes out en masse and we get the reality of what's really going on, do you think that some of us could be reversed in age? We might be able to go to the equivalent of the Starfleet Fleet Academy and actually sign up and travel through the universe, much like Gene Roddenberry envisioned for this generation?
Well, it's very interesting that you asked that question. That's one of the technologies that, according to William Tompkins, will be revealed, and we can see it already in the white world literature. They're already acknowledging that age regression is possible. That they've been able to do experiments with mice where they've been able to kind of restore kind of vitality or youth in mice. That these are white world experiments, and that's kind of like telling us that these black world or covert world technologies are about to be released. And I think that that'll be one of the technologies that help people accept the truth of this and actually give people a sense of hope for the future, that age regression is something that is possible. And the big question for us is going to be, do we do this through chemical, technological means, or do we do this through consciousness-raising means? That's something that I think all of us that are involved in this at some level are going to make a decision. But yes, I think age regression is going to be part of the new disclosures, official disclosures that are coming our way, of course, as well as new energy and advanced space propulsion technologies, time travel, and so forth, that all of these things will be released. Whether it's going to all happen with a big bang or whether it's going to be graduated over a number of years, that's something that is going to kind of work itself out, I guess. But yes, age regression, I think, is something that a lot of people can look forward to. And so, yeah, definitely keep yourself kind of open-minded, maintain a positive mindset for the future, and, keep that vitality, in that youthful vitality, because I think eventually the physical body is going to be something that is going to reflect the mindset or the consciousness of people.
Right, and that's very important, because there is a theory that our mind is creating all this and that our consciousness, since we believe in aging and dying, we're actually creating it. And I have a friend, Dr. Aubrey de Grey, who's in the real world, doing research, and he and his team, at least this was a couple of years ago, said that they have technologies that will increase longevity of human beings, so half of the people alive today, to 1,000 years, not 120, but 1,000 years. So they're already developing these things. So it's interesting that if we put all this on the table about what's actually going on in the secret space programs, and that can be incorporated into the belief system of humanity through things like your books and these shows, that some people in this generation may actually activate the process within their own DNA, which is a program, by accessing their own spirituality and their own beliefs and thoughts to reverse their own aging. And I think that's happening with Sasha. I witness him every day getting younger and younger. Okay, we have just a few minutes left. Do you have any other feedback?
Well, just I'm interested in this collapse of the shield that was keeping the Drake goes out and what kind of restoration there could be. The Link Institute seemed to give some kind of hints that there was a move by the friendly extraterrestrials to somehow restore the shield to keep us from continually being invaded. Do you have any info on that?
Well, there are two shields, or frequency fences is the way Corey refers to them. One is around our solar system that was put there by the Sphere Being Alliance, and another one that was put around our planet. The one around our planet has been lifted to a certain extent, which has allowed different ET groups to leave or come and go more from our planet. But the one around our solar system remains in place. So this is what is keeping the Dark Fleet and the draconian kind of reinforcements outside of our solar system, which is why we have so much turmoil at the moment, because there have been defections amongst the Dark Fleet and the corporate-run space programs, and the draconians themselves are being forced to negotiate because they're losing their strength more and more because they're not able to get reinforcements into this sector of the solar system. So definitely this has meant that what is happening now is that people are being given an opportunity to learn the truth, raise their consciousness, and change things on their planet, rather than the draconians, the Dark Fleet, the corporate-run programs basically coming in with more powerful forces to basically obliterate that we can change the system on our planet.
Wow.
So we have just a couple minutes. What would you like our listeners to know that we haven't talked about already?
Well, I think I'm going to be doing some events. I'm going to go to Australia in another week, and I'll be there doing some tours in 3 Australian cities. Also, there's a conference event in Mount Shasta where I'll be doing presentations with Corey Goode, and I'll be revealing the latest information from William Tompkins. We haven't talked too much about him today, but his information is incredible because he brings in the role of corporations in setting up the secret space programs. Laura Eisenhower will be there as well in Mount Shasta, as will be Rob Porter. So it's going to be a great conference. That's going to be at the end of August at Mount Shasta. So you can just go to my website, exopolitics.org, and there'll be links to these conference events and links to the book and the articles that I put up there. So just want to thank you, Janet and Sasha, for having me on the show. I think it's great what you do here in raising consciousness, and I really enjoy being part of this.
Oh, thank you. We love getting your info. You're so articulate and you're so well researched. I can't recommend your book too highly. I want everybody to see the Insiders Reveal, the secret space programs and extraterrestrial alliances. Everybody's got to read this book.
Right, and we'll have to have you back again, and we can focus on, William Tompkins and any other information that you learn. I know every time I go out to a conference, I learn as much from the people that I interact with than I'm teaching, So I love being out there, and I know you do too. So good luck on your tour. And I wish I could be there with you in Shasta. Rob Potter's been over here in Maui hanging out with us for a while, and he talked about it. And who knows, maybe I can join you, but he invited us. Hopefully, I heard that there's a direct connection down to the inner Earth at Shasta. Maybe you'll meet some people. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Make aloha.
Thank you. Mahalo, love, blessings, and aloha.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Who owns you? If you're not in control, then someone else is. Join me, Ivy West, for Voices on the Wind, Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern in Studio A. I discuss government, health, metaphysics, suppressed science, universal mysteries, little-known incredible facts, alternative energies, and even more than you can imagine. Won't you join us on Revolution Radio Saturdays from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern for Voices on the Wind with me, Ivy West.
There are lives in the balance, people under fire, children at the cannons.
Because if your head's in the sand, your tail is a target.